Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Right, Andy, can you take us to the roll call, please?
Earl Boulder here. Amanda Stanfield.
Here.
Lacey Willard.
Here.
Rick Jacobs. Dan Justice here. Thank you.
All right, let's go ahead and consider approval of the November 24th, 2021 meeting minutes. Those would have been sent out to our board members with our pre-packets. Any questions on those? And if not, entertain a motion.
I'll move to approve minutes for November 24th.
We have a move for approval. Is there a second? I'll second. Okay, any discussion? All those in favor of approval of the November 24th minutes, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? All right, those minutes are approved. We're going to head on to new business and public hearings. Case number 06, the AR 2021, 400 Church Street, King Water Plant. Adam, could you get us into the details?
All right. First case before us tonight deals with the number of variances that are sought for our new water plant. So the applicant is GRW Engineering or Reynolds Construction on behalf of the town of Fortville. They're seeking development standards variance approval pertaining to a new water plant, which is just shy of 6,000 square feet. And that'll be located at 400 Church Street. It's right near the Hampton baseball fields behind the current facility. So the plant will replace that existing facility and it will be larger to accommodate growth in the town's water surface area. So there are 3 variances that are being requested from the zoning ordinance, and I'll get into a little bit more detail here momentarily. The first one deals with parking space size, looking to allow 9 by 18 spaces instead of 10 by 20 that's required by the ordinance in this area of town. The second one deals with fence height, which would be to allow a 12-foot tall fence in excess of the maximum of 8 feet. And then the third one deals with parking lot landscape islands to essentially remove that requirement. So here's an aerial of the site. You can see the Hampton baseball diamonds to the north, tennis courts off to the west, and I'll have another exhibit here momentarily that shows where the plant is laid out geographically on this. But you can see the parking lot that is behind the existing water plant. If you follow the cursor, the existing water plant is right here as you drive into the park. And then, of course, off to the south is the community center. So here's a ground photo of the existing water plant that I think was built in the 60s, maybe. This is what the setup looks like behind the current water plant. And this is looking to the northeast. There is a residential home that is adjacent to this area. And then here's another photo looking at the parking area and this gazebo, which would be removed. If we take a look at the zoning map, you can see that the entire property is zoned IN, institutional. Of note, the property right next door that happens to be a residential property also happens to be zoned that IN zoning as well. How that came to be, I'm not sure, but it's institutional as well. And then a portion, you can see that the property over here next to that one has some split zoning. So there's some oddities with the zoning map in this area, which we carried over from Hancock County. So here's the concept site plan. It essentially features the building right behind the existing facility, which would be torn down, the parking lot area behind it and off to the west, and then in front of the tennis courts further to the west There's kind of a subset of the drawings here that you see there's some additional parking spaces. So the project, the site plan was approved by the Plan Commission on Tuesday. And of course, it's subject to approval of these variances by this board. And so here is the exhibit that I was referring to. It kind of shows how that facility will be laid on the site. Sorry about that, folks. We were had some connection issues here, but we're back online. So here's the concept building elevation. Again, this is from the front. Let me make sure the screen is still shared. Minimize this. Okay, so here you can see there's a variety of different angles of the structure. It has some good articulation, mixed materials that have a metal roof. Pretty well designed from that perspective. And you can see the fence that would be provided around the facility. Okay, so the first item deals with those parking spaces. This would be to allow 9x18s instead of 10x20. And in the general zoning ordinance, not the Broadway main overlay, just the general zoning ordinance, for 90-degree parking spaces, you're supposed to provide 10x20. And the reason for this variance, or the justification, would really be in order to maximize the amount of public parking that's available for the park, the baseball diamonds, and tennis courts, and frankly, to reduce public expenditure on the parking area. It should be noted that 9x18 is a common parking space size, and that's in fact what's prescribed in the Broadway main overlay. And I also wanted to mention that ADA spaces would be unaffected, so those would still match the dimensions that are prescribed by federal and state law. In terms of any remonstrance for this variance, we're not aware of any. And then quickly moving through the decision criteria or the findings. The first one on general welfare. The approval will not be injurious to the public health, safety, morals, and general welfare of the community. I'd say yes to that. B, that the adjacent property, that the use and value of the area adjacent to the property included in the variance will not be affected in a substantially adverse manner. I'd say yes, that's not an issue. And then item C, practical difficulty, that the strict application of the terms of this chapter will result in a practical difficulty in the use of the property. I'd say that strict application would either result in the loss of parking available to the public or additional public expenditure for additional parking area. So with that, my recommendation on that first of three variances is to approve. The second one deals with fence height. So as I mentioned, that would allow a 12-foot tall fence in excess of the maximum 8 feet that is allowed per the ordinance. And so that does apply even in institutional zoning districts as highlighted here. The reason for this variance is in order to provide additional security for the plant and screening of the equipment for the property to the east. As I mentioned earlier, fence is decorative in nature. It's a metal fence with some CMU concrete masonry unit columns to provide some additional aesthetic. And in terms of remonstrance on this variance, we're not aware of any from the public. And again, going back to the litmus test, the general welfare standard doesn't appear to be an issue there. Adjacent property doesn't appear to be an issue there. And then practical difficulty, I'd say that strict application would provide less security and less screening, especially when needed in relation to a nearby residential property. So my recommendation on that one would be to approve. And then the final one deals with parking lot landscape islands. This is the section from the code, and frankly, that requirement was always intended for. It applies to the multitude of zoning districts, including this one. But as you can see, it's really intended for retail, office, even maybe light industrial. But in this particular case, the reason to remove it, we feel, is that the existing parking lot does not currently have landscaped islands. Secondly, it's as you can see from the aerial, and of course, I'm sure you're familiar with the site, it's already within a natural park setting today, and it's surrounded by green space. And the other concern that was raised by our consultants is that large vehicles servicing the water plant might damage some of those islands. So that would be the justification. And then in terms of remonstrance, like the other two, we're not aware of anything from the public. So in terms of the litmus test, the general welfare, not an issue there. Adjacent property, not an issue there. And then in terms of practical difficulty, we'd say that strict application would be an unnecessary public expense in beautifying a parking lot already surrounded by green space. So my recommendation on that third one, like the others, is to approve that. So if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address those. We also have Doug Tischbein, the town's representative from Reynolds Construction, is on the Zoom.
Any questions for Adam?
Let me. So mute.
Okay.
As far as how many, it's really irrelevant, I'm just curious, of how many parking spaces are there now versus what the new is going to be? Is it equal, more than, less than?
Yes, I'm glad you mentioned that. I had it in the plan commission report. I guess
And I've got
I
that.
should have mentioned in that one. I think it was, if I remember correctly, in the plan commission review, there was, I think, 64 spaces there today. And then after construction, with the addition of those spaces by the tennis court, there would be 68. So there actually be a few more. So there were 65 post plus 3 for employees at the plant.
Adam, remind me, besides aesthetics, what typically is the function of a landscape island? Loading, unloading, is there any other function?
Well, no, I'd say mainly aesthetics. Secondly, I mean, there's some environmental benefits to trying to reduce the heat island effect and things of that nature, especially more in retail parking lots. So I'd say aesthetics and environmental.
And my last question is, has there been any discussion or thoughts about taking care of that, the oddity of the zoning in that area? I know it wouldn't be something with this, but sometimes we have sort of done that, so.
Yes, in fact, the property owner who lives next door, they came to the plan commission meeting and was asked that very question about the zoning. And I said if we could change that. So I said, I advised that he just at least send an email and we could potentially do a town initiated rezone to clean up that area. Just because usually the benefits of doing that is if they ever sell the property, or if they refinance, sometimes they want to make sure that it's zoned residentially. And again, I don't know what the history is on it, how it came to be that way. It's a little odd. I know that property at one time was all owned by, I think, the Hamilton family or the Hampton family. And, but the house has been there, since the 50s or 60s. So again, it's something that I think we
Thank you.
probably address.
Thank you. Any other questions for Adam?
Yeah, there's a structure back behind there, the clubhouse like that.
Yeah.
Is that gonna be removed or moved somewhere else?
Yeah, we had, that came up it came up at the plan commission meeting as well to see if that could be salvaged. And I know that Joe Renner had mentioned that probably not, maybe some of the materials, if not, at least the benches, tables, things of that nature.
So just for our reference here, the planning commission had 4 considerations that when we approved, we would like them to take. One was putting lighting on the west side of the parking lot, another was preserving the trees on the east side, another was clarifying the property line with that residential adjacency, and then the 4th was considering if we could relocate the shelter within the parks grounds. Those are the 4 things that we had recommended, but they were contingencies of approval. Any other questions for Adam? All right, anything else? We do have time in our agenda for those who, I think the GC is on virtually. Any other comments from the GC?
Doug,
Okay, Doug.
do you have any comments?
My apologies. I'm having a hard time hearing if there's any questions pointed in my direction. If there are, if you could just please restate them, I'd be more than happy to answer.
No questions for you. Just wanted to see if you had anything else you wanted to add.
There's been some discussion about the shelter, and there was earlier discussion about relocating it down towards the dog and skate park. And I think that's still in discussion with Heath. It just hasn't been decided at this point. So it's not a total elimination for the use of that shelter at this point. It's just still being discussed and trying to figure out whether we can reconstruct or there has to be new construction in order to replace that shelter for the future years.
Got it. Thanks, Doug. Any other questions from the BZA for Doug? Boy, that really gets loud when you get up there. Okay. We do have time in our agenda for those who might want to remonstrate or have questions for this proposal. Anybody online? Anybody here? Let the record reflect none. We do have time in our agenda for those who are with the government. Do you have any comments or statements? I got a no here. Anybody online? Getting some, I'm not getting anything, so I'm going to count this. Okay, let's head back. Any other clarifications from the BZA before we prod someone for a motion?
Yeah, I just got a quick clarification or question on that shelter house. Who is the deciding? I mean, will that have to go through like a plan review, all that kind of stuff, or is that something whoever's constructing the water plant would take care of as well? I mean, how does that come about?
So the Reynolds Construction is working on behalf of the town. And so I think, frankly, the decision on that would probably fall between Joe and Heath, as manager, ultimately on that.
Okay. Anyone like to? We would handle these individually. Is typically the recommendation that we go with.
Sure.
3 variances for consideration. Anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move to approve the variance number 1 for the parking space size, moving it from 10 by 20 to 9 by 18.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All right, motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, let's go into a voice vote. All those in favor of approving the variance number 1 of 3, the parking space size, indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Any abstain? We're going to wait on our paperwork here for a second. And would anybody like to make a motion on variance number 2 of 3?
Yeah, sure. I will. I'd like to move that we approve variance number 2 for the fence height going from 8 foot to 12 feet.
Okay, there's been a motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Motion and a second for approval. Any discussion? Let's go for a voice vote. All those in favor of approving variance number 2 of 3 for the fence height indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any abstain? And hi there, Rick. Let the record reflect that we've got Rick participating as well. We were in and out at the beginning of here, so Rick, we've got you in a minute. Okay, let's head on to variance number 3 of 3. Is there a motion in regard to this?
I'll make a motion that we approve variance number 3 to eliminate the landscape islands in the parking lot.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? And let's do a voice vote. All those in favor of variance number 3 of 3, removing the parking lot landscaping islands, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay. Let's take just a moment. Those are the 3 items on our agenda. While we do our paperwork, Adam, could you get us primed to discuss case number 05SE 2021, 3103 West 1000 North, which is the CLM pallet company site.
Thank you, everybody. This is Doug. I'm going to drop off. Happy New Year to everyone.
Happy New Year, Doug. Thanks.
Thanks,
for joining.
Doug.
Thank you.
I'm gonna get their last official signatures of 2021 going here.
Andy, can you mail that paperwork to Rick? Rick, we'll mail the paperwork to you with the self-addressed stamp that one, so.
All right, looks like we have some paperwork done on our side, and we perhaps are getting ready for our next item.
Okay, the next item before you all involves a special exception. This is at 3103 West of 1000 North, also known as 96th Street in Hamilton County. The zoning on this property is industrial 2 or I-2. And that is a grandfather designation that was carried over from Hancock County that remains applicable today in Fortville. Tony Matthews of AC Matt Holdings LLC recently purchased the CLM pallet company site at this address. And by the way, CLM will continue to operate on the property for at least the foreseeable future. And Mr. Matthews placed boat storage on the property, and it was discovered that this use requires a special exception per the 2002 Hancock County zoning ordinance, in which use regulations remain applicable. He'd like to have as many as 200 boats on the property. And just of note, like the last case, all required public hearing notices were completed in accordance with the law. There's an aerial of the site. You can see the CLM pallet company. I'll have a zoomed in aerial here momentarily. You can see off to the north is a newer subdivision in Fishers called Preserve at Arbor Pines. And then off to the east is a Duke Energy transformer substation. And then there's a new self-storage complex that's under construction right now. And then off to the west is the Deaton's Waterfront Services, the new building that they built on that property. And of course, we've got the railroad and State Route 67 off to the south. So this oblique aerial was taken back in March of this year. You can see that the items in blue are actually boats with tarps on them. And then there are some tractor trailers that are being stored out on the site. Towards the back, there is some raw materials from the pallet company. And then most notably along the south side of the road or south side of the property, you've got a pretty sizable berm with some landscaping, some very good buffering that I know that the town had worked hard to achieve, to have implemented when that company first went into existence there. So this is essentially what you see from 1000 North if you're standing there. You can make out the blue tarps of the boats. Just for reference, if you take a look at the zoning map, again, you can see this is essentially a heavy industrial site flanked by 2 light industrial sites in the town. As we go further out, there's industrial general, or frankly, a higher, that would be the equivalent to I-2 in the county. And then to the north is zone PUD and Fishers. And then there's some commercial zoning off to the south along State Route 67. In terms of remonstrance, we're not aware of any. We haven't received any. In terms of the analysis and the suggested findings, approval criteria, number 1, I'd say that the special exception is listed in the zoning ordinance. Number 2, the special exception can be served with adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, or other necessary facilities. Third item would be that that special exception shall not involve any element or cause any condition that may be dangerous, injurious, or noxious to any other property or persons, and shall comply with the development standards in the zoning ordinance. Fourth item would be that the special exception is sorted, oriented, and landscaped to produce a harmonious relationship of buildings and grounds to adjacent buildings and properties. What I would add to this one is that the boats are set back over 350 feet from the right-of-way frontage of 1000 North. And additionally, a landscape mound is in place along the south edge of the property to provide additional screening from State Route 67. Fifth item would be the special exception produces a total visual impression and environment which is consistent with the environment of the neighborhood. So I'd add to that the property is zoned for heavy industrial and it's a pallet plant. This use is appropriate in this setting. Additionally, tractor trailer storage is already on site, which does not require a special exception. Sixth item would be that the special exception organizes vehicular access and parking to minimize traffic congestion in the neighborhood. And then lastly, the special exception preserves the purpose of the zoning ordinance. In terms of my recommendation, I would suggest approving it, but with a condition that boats shall not be stored north of the front plane of the building. Now, I also wanted to note that screening such as fencing and landscaping could be required. But in my opinion, because of the far setback of the boats from the road, more than 350 feet, and the lack of any remonstrance, in my opinion, it doesn't appear to be necessary in this case. Additionally, the whole reason that this issue came about is Mr. Matthews is actively interested in developing the grassy outlot along 1000 North, which would essentially block the view of those boats anyway. So with that, if you have any questions, I'd be more than happy to address them. And Don Fisher from Insight Engineering is here as well, representing the owner. Thank you.
Thanks, Adam. Any questions for Adam? I have maybe one or two. Does this include RV storage or is it only going to be boat storage? Would be very particular about the type of
My
vehicle.
understanding is only boat storage.
Okay. And the condition that you put into place is in consideration of the adjacency to the PUDs. right? Is that just where those?
Yes.
Okay. Typically, in these types of situations, we ask a question about traffic patterns and additional traffic that might be put onto the site. We already have a lot of traffic with trailers and stuff, right? So it's not a different traffic use, or is it?
I would say that the any uptick in traffic would be, the existing roadway system would be able to adequately handle it.
Okay, last question for me, because they're dissimilar uses between the tractor trailers and the industrial, and then sort of boats, people coming in, getting in boats, not any safety concerns with cross use of those traffic patterns on site,
Not in my opinion, no.
not with that size, okay. Those are my questions. Any other questions for Adam? Any questions, Mr. Fisher? Or Mr. Fisher, would you like to add anything?
I do have a, excuse me, I'm Don
just
Fisher,
go-
didn't sign anything.
Go ahead
I
and
do have
tell us.
one thing to add to one of your questions, because I've been on site a lot. And the boats are brought in and out by a company instead of individuals.
Very
So
good.
they have 2 or 3 trucks that they just bring them in and bring them out. And so it's the same people all the time. It's not public
We
access.
all know the site, very good, thank you so much. Okay, let's head on. Is there anyone online or here who would like to demonstrate or speak advanced or have any questions about this project? Okay, we have none.
One quick question. I do have one quick question.
Go ahead, Rick.
Does this have any effect on the new Fortville storage? And the fact that, I mean, potentially, are they going to have a boat storage as well?
The Fortville self-storage, they may have some boat storage there as well, but to Don's point, that would be primarily individuals just storing their boats inside of enclosed garages.
Any follow-ups to that, Rick?
Okay, no, I just wanted to check and see if that was something, because they're building that new building right there as well.
Okay. Any other questions for monsters? There's none. Any government officials like to have any comments on this? No. Okay. Any other questions from the BZA members of Adam?
And there was no, your client has no issue with the boats staying beyond that, not going beyond that plane of the building?
Right. I just remember I was going to come up.
Come on
Yeah.
up.
I just want
So,
to make sure.
yes, the commitment for the buildings to be not north of the north face of the building is perfectly fine.
Okay.
Acceptable.
Good question. Any other good questions? Right. We can entertain a motion.
I move to go ahead and grant the special exception for the boat storage for 3103 West 1000 North.
Okay, there's been a motion to approve. Is there a second? A second, any discussion?
Yeah, should we put a condition on there?
Yeah, we can say as presented by staff, as
With the
recommended by staff.
conditions presented by
Is that
staff.
okay with you with the new motion?
Yeah.
All right. So it's been motioned to approve the special exception as recommended by staff with the conditions. Is that okay with your second as well? Yes. Good. All right. Any other discussion? All right, let's call for a verbal vote. All those in favor of approving the special exception with staff recommendations and conditions as outlined, indicate by saying aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstain? Okay, motion carries. Let's go do a little bit of paperwork here. Passing down to Andy. Anything else in our agenda for discussion?
No,
Okay. We've already get finished with their signatures and then we can entertain a motion to adjourn. All right, anybody like to make a motion?
Move to adjourn.
Second,
Yes.
all those in favor, indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
And we are adjourned. Thanks, everybody. Happy New Year.
thank you all.
Okay, thank you.
Very hard to watch right now.